in the unforgiving expanse of the American frontier in 1950, where the remnants of the Old West still clung to existence like dust on weathered boots, stories of survival and unexpected human connection were born from the harshest circumstances. This is the tale of two souls from different worlds, one a solitary cowboy who had chosen isolation over the pain of human connection, and the other an Apache woman whose spirit refused to be broken even when left to die under the merciless desert sun. Their meeting would challenge everything they believed about trust, healing, and the possibility of understanding between two cultures that had been at war for generations. What happens when compassion transcends the boundaries of race, culture, and a lifetime of taught mistrust? Sometimes, in the most desolate places, the most profound human connections are forged. But before we begin, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're listening from. The autumn sun hung low over the New Mexico territory, casting long shadows across the scrubland that stretched endlessly toward the distant mountains. Thomas McKenna guided his horse through the familiar terrain, his weathered hands steady on the reins as he surveyed the land that had been his solitary kingdom for the past 8 years. At 42, Tom had grown accustomed to the silence that surrounded his remote ranch, a silence broken only by the wind through the sagebrush and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. The ranch sat in a natural basin, protected by rocky outcroppings and fed by a reliable spring that had drawn him to this place after the war. He had built everything with his own hands: the modest wooden house, the sturdy barn, the corrals where he kept his small herd of cattle. It was a life of honest work and blessed isolation, far from the memories that still haunted his dreams. As Tom rode the perimeter of his property, checking for signs of predators or damaged fencing, his horse suddenly stopped and snorted nervously. The animal's ears pricked forward, focused on something beyond a cluster of juniper trees. Tom dismounted, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle secured to his saddle. "Easy, Thunder," he murmured to the horse, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had learned to read the subtle signs of danger. Moving cautiously through the brush, Tom's boots crunched softly on the dry earth. The smell hit him first: blood, sharp and metallic in the cool air. His pulse quickened as he pushed through the low branches and found her. An Apache woman lay crumpled against a large boulder, her long black hair matted with blood and dirt. Her buckskin dress was torn and stained, and angry welts on her wrists suggested she had been bound. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. Tom could see multiple wounds: a deep gash across her forehead, cuts on her arms, and what appeared to be a knife wound at her side that had soaked her clothing with blood. For a moment, Tom stood frozen. Finding an injured Apache woman on his land was more than unexpected. It was dangerous. The territorial conflicts between white settlers and the Apache had been fierce for decades, and even now, in 1950, tensions ran high. Helping her could bring trouble he couldn't imagine. But as he looked at her face, peaceful despite the violence that had been done to her, Tom felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Compassion. She was someone's daughter, perhaps someone's sister or mother. She was a human being in desperate need, and he was the only one who could help. Tom knelt beside her and gently touched her wrist, feeling for a pulse. It was weak but steady. Her skin was cold, and he knew she wouldn't survive the night in the open. The temperature would drop significantly after sunset, and there were wolves in these hills. "What happened to you?" he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Carefully, Tom slipped his arms beneath her, surprised by how light she felt. She stirred slightly as he lifted her, a soft moan escaping her lips, but she didn't regain consciousness. He carried her to his horse, gently draping her across the saddle before mounting behind her to hold her steady. The ride back to the ranch took 20 minutes, during which Tom found himself acutely aware of every breath she took, every slight movement that indicated she was still alive. He had seen enough death during the war to recognize when someone was close to crossing that final threshold, and this woman was walking that thin line. At the ranch, Tom carried her into his house and laid her on his own bed, the only comfortable place he had. The interior of his home was sparse but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and the single bedroom. He had never brought another person into this space, and the presence of the wounded woman seemed to fill it with an energy he hadn't felt in years. Tom lit the oil lamp and gathered what medical supplies he had: some clean cloth, a bottle of whiskey for disinfecting wounds, and a needle and thread he used for mending. His hands, more accustomed to handling ropes and tools, worked with surprising gentleness as he began to clean her wounds. The gash on her forehead was deep but not life-threatening. The cuts on her arms were defensive wounds, suggesting she had fought back against her attackers. But the knife wound at her side was serious. Tom cleaned it carefully, his jaw tightening as he imagined the violence that had been done to her. As he worked, she stirred again, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, they were unfocused, but then they fixed on his face with startling intensity. Dark brown eyes, filled with pain but also with a fierce intelligence that took his breath away. "Don't move," Tom said softly, his voice carrying none of the authority he used with his animals. "You're safe now. I'm trying to help you." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her assessing him, trying to understand where she was and whether he represented a threat. Then, as if the effort was too much, her eyes closed again and she slipped back into unconsciousness. Tom continued his work, stitching the worst of her wounds with the careful precision of a man who had learned to be self-sufficient in all things. When he finished, he covered her with his warmest blanket and built up the fire in the main room. Then he settled into his rocking chair, his rifle across his knees, and began the long vigil of watching over her. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and howling through the eaves. Tom found himself thinking about the woman lying in his bed, wondering who she was and what had brought her to this place. He thought about the risks he was taking by helping her, but somehow, those risks seemed less important than the simple fact that she was alive and in need of care. As the night deepened, Tom dozed fitfully in his chair, waking frequently to check on his unexpected guest. Each time, he was relieved to see the steady rise and fall of her chest, proof that she was still fighting for life. And each time, he felt that strange stirring in his chest, a feeling he had thought buried forever, the desire to protect something precious. Dawn broke gray and cold over the New Mexico landscape, and Tom woke to the sound of his patient stirring. He had dozed off in his chair despite his intentions to stay vigilant through the night. Moving quickly to the bedroom, he found the Apache woman trying to sit up, her face contorted with pain. "Whoa there," Tom said gently, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You need to rest. You've lost a lot of blood." She looked at him with those penetrating dark eyes, and this time she was fully conscious. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse but clear, and she spoke in English with only a slight accent. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her gaze never leaving his face. Tom was surprised by the directness of her question. "Because you needed help," he answered simply. "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, clearly weighing whether to trust him with even this basic information. Finally she said, "Aiyana. It means eternal blossom in my language. I'm Tom McKenna. This is my ranch. You're safe here." Aiyana tried to sit up again, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. "I need to go. My presence here will bring trouble." "You're not going anywhere in your condition," Tom said firmly. "You can barely sit up, let alone travel. Besides, where would you go?" The question seemed to hit her hard, and Tom saw pain flash across her features that had nothing to do with her physical wounds. She turned her face away from him, but not before he saw the tears she was trying to hide. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted quietly. "My family is dead. My village was attacked by men who wanted our land. I was the only one who escaped, and they hunted me for 3 days before they caught me." Tom felt his chest tighten at her words. "Who were they?" "White men. They said the Apache were nothing but vermin to be exterminated. They killed my husband, my brother, everyone I loved. They left me for dead after." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Tom didn't need her to finish. He could see the full story in her eyes, and it filled him with a rage he hadn't felt since the war. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "I'm truly sorry for what they did to you." Aiyana looked at him again, studying his face. You are different from other white men I have known. I hope so, Tom replied. Let me get you some water and something to eat. You need to build up your strength. Over the next few days, Tom established a routine of caring for his unexpected guest. He would check her wounds morning and evening, changing the bandages and applying fresh salve he made from herbs he found on his land. He prepared simple meals, broth at first, then more substantial food as her appetite returned. And slowly, Aiyana began to heal. As she grew stronger, she began to move around the house, though Tom could see she was still in considerable pain. She watched him with curious eyes as he went about his daily chores, and gradually, they began to talk more. You live alone here? She asked one evening as they sat by the fire. For 8 years now, Tom replied. I came here after the war. What war? The war between the states. I fought for the Union Army, lost a lot of friends, saw too much death. When it was over, I just wanted to find a place where I could be at peace. Aiyana nodded slowly. I understand. My people have known much war. Sometimes the desire for peace becomes stronger than the need for vengeance. Is that why you're not afraid of me? Tom asked. Because you're tired of war? She considered this. I am not afraid of you because you have shown me kindness when you could have shown me cruelty. You have gentle hands and a quiet spirit. These are not the qualities of a man who makes war. Tom felt something warm spread through his chest at her words. Your wounds are healing well, he said, changing the subject because her observation had touched something deep inside him. Yes, thanks to your care. But I have been thinking, I cannot stay here much longer. My people will come looking for me, and when they find me here with you, they will not understand. What will they think? Aiyana looked into the fire, her expression troubled. They will think I have betrayed them by accepting help from a white man. They will think you have taken advantage of my weakness. Either way, blood will be spilled. Tom had been dreading this conversation, but he knew she was right. When do you think they'll come? Soon. They are skilled trackers, and they will not give up searching for me. They loved my husband, and they will want to know what happened to me. That night, Tom lay awake in his makeshift bed in the main room, listening to the sounds of the night and wondering what would happen when Aiyana's people found her. He had grown accustomed to her presence in his home, to the sound of her voice, and the way she moved so quietly through his space. The thought of her leaving filled him with a loneliness he hadn't expected. But more than that, he was worried about her safety. She had told him more of her story over the past few days, how she had been married to a war chief, how she had lost 2 children to disease, how she had been respected in her village for her knowledge of healing plants and her skill with horses. Now she had nothing and nowhere to go. The next morning, Tom found Aiyana outside, sitting on the porch and watching the sunrise. She had braided her long black hair and was wearing a clean dress he had found among his few possessions, something left behind by the previous owner of the ranch. How are you feeling? He asked, settling beside her on the wooden steps. Stronger, she replied. Strong enough to leave, I think. Tom felt his heart sink, but he nodded. Where will you go? I don't know. Perhaps I will find another Apache band that will take me in. Or perhaps I will go to the reservation and try to make a life there. You don't sound enthusiastic about either option. Aiyana sighed. The reservation is a place of sadness and defeat. My people are not meant to live in such places. But life with another band, I would always be an outsider, reminder of the violence that could come to them as well. Tom was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised even him. You could stay here. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide with surprise. What? I mean it. This ranch is isolated, peaceful. You could heal here. Take time to decide what you want to do with your life. I could use the help, and you could have a safe place to recover. Tom, that is impossible. My people will come, and when they do, then we'll face that when it happens. Tom interrupted. But until then, you don't have to make any decisions. You can just be. Aiyana stared at him for a long moment, and Tom could see the conflict in her eyes. Part of her wanted to accept his offer, but another part knew the dangers it would bring. Why would you risk this? She asked finally. Why would you risk your safety for someone you barely know? Tom looked out over the landscape he had come to love, searching for the right words. Because for the first time in 8 years, I don't feel alone. Because helping you heal has reminded me what it feels like to care about someone. And because I think you might be the bravest person I've ever met. Tears gathered in Aiyana's eyes, and she reached out to touch his hand. You are a good man, Tom McKenna. But goodness is not always enough to overcome the hatred between our peoples. Maybe not, Tom admitted, but maybe it's a start. As the days passed, an unexpected partnership began to form between Tom and Aiyana. She proved to be surprisingly knowledgeable about ranch work, having grown up around horses and cattle in her village. Her hands, skilled at beadwork and hide tanning, adapted quickly to mending harnesses and repairing fences. Tom found himself looking forward to her quiet presence as they worked side by side. Your cattle are healthy, Aiyana observed one morning as they checked the herd. But you could improve their grazing by moving them to different areas more often. Tom looked at her with interest. You know about cattle management. My people have raised horses for generations. The principles are similar. Animals need variety in their diet, and the land needs time to recover. She pointed to a section of pasture that had been grazed down to stubble. That area should rest for several weeks before you bring the cattle back. Tom nodded, impressed by her knowledge. I've been doing this by instinct mostly. I never had anyone to teach me the finer points. I can teach you, Aiyana said, then caught herself. I mean, while I'm here, I could share what I know. The careful way she qualified her statement reminded Tom of the temporary nature of their arrangement, but he pushed the thought aside. I'd like that. As they worked together, Tom began to see Aiyana as she truly was. Not just a wounded woman he had rescued, but an intelligent, capable person with her own skills and wisdom. She taught him about the medicinal properties of local plants, showed him how to read weather patterns and the behavior of animals, and shared stories of her people's deep connection to the land. In return, Tom shared his knowledge of ranching, his experiences during the war, and slowly, carefully, the story of why he had chosen this isolated life. He told her about the nightmares that still came sometimes, about the friends he had lost, and about the wife he had planned to marry who had died of fever while he was away fighting. Her name was Sarah, he said one evening as they sat by the fire. We were going to have a farm back in Missouri, raise children, grow old together. When I got home and found her grave, I felt like part of me had died with her. Aiyana listened without judgment, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Grief is a heavy burden to carry alone, she said softly. In my culture, we believe that the spirits of those we love continue to watch over us. Perhaps your Sarah brought you to me, knowing I would need your help. Tom had never thought of it that way, but the idea brought him an unexpected comfort. Maybe she did, he said. Maybe she knew I needed to help someone, to feel useful again. Their conversations grew deeper and more personal as the weeks passed. Aiyana told him about her life before the attack, her marriage to a man she had loved deeply, the children she had lost, her role as a healer in her village. Tom shared his dreams of expanding the ranch, his loneliness, and his growing fear that Aiyana would leave before he was ready to let her go. I've been thinking, Tom said one morning as they worked together to repair a section of corral fence, about what happens when your people come looking for you. Aiyana's hand stilled on the fence post she was holding. What do you mean? I mean, what if we could find a way to make them understand that you're here by choice, that you're safe and being treated with respect? Aiyana shook her head. Tom, you don't understand. In their eyes, I am a woman who has been dishonored by what those men did to me. For me to be living alone with a white man, even one who has shown me kindness, will be seen as further dishonor. But surely they would understand once they saw how you've recovered, how you've been cared for. You think like a white man, Aiyana said, not unkindly. You believe that logic and good intentions can overcome centuries of mistrust and pain. But my people have learned to be suspicious of white men who claim to help. Too many promises have been broken, too many treaties violated. Tom felt a surge of frustration. So there's no way at all for them to accept that we're That we care about each other." The words hung between them, and Tom realized he had said more than he intended. Aiyana's eyes widened, and she looked at him with a mixture of surprise and something that might have been hope. "Do we care about each other?" she asked quietly. Tom set down his hammer and turned to face her fully. "I care about you, Aiyana. More than I thought I could care about anyone again. These past few weeks, having you here, working beside you, talking with you, it's brought me back to life in a way I didn't think was possible." Aiyana's eyes filled with tears. "I care about you too, Tom. You saved my life, yes, but more than that, you've given me a reason to want to live. With you, I feel like I could be whole again." They moved toward each other without conscious thought, and Tom reached out to cup her face in his hands. Her skin was warm and soft, and he could feel her trembling slightly. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "I don't know," Tom admitted, "but whatever it is, it feels right." He kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is dangerous," Aiyana said, but she didn't pull away from his embrace. "I know," Tom replied, "but I can't bring myself to care about the danger. Not when I finally found something worth fighting for." That night, they made love with a desperate tenderness, as if they both knew their time together might be short. Afterward, they lay in each other's arms, talking softly about their hopes and fears. "If we could go anywhere," Tom said, "where would you want to go?" Aiyana considered this. "Somewhere far from here, where no one knows who we are or where we come from. Somewhere we could just be Tom and Aiyana, without the weight of our people's history." "California, maybe?" Tom suggested. "I've heard there are places there where a man can start over, where people don't ask too many questions about your past." "Would you really leave this place? You've worked so hard to build it." Tom looked around the bedroom he had built with his own hands, at the life he had created in this isolated valley. "I'd leave it all behind if it meant I could be with you," he said, and meant it. But even as they made plans and spoke of a future together, both knew that their time was running out. The signs were subtle but unmistakable. Hoof prints near the stream, the nervous behavior of the cattle, the way the birds had gone silent in certain areas of the ranch. Aiyana's people were closing in. "How long do we have?" Tom asked the next morning, having noticed the same signs. "A day, maybe two," Aiyana replied. "They're being careful, scouting the area before they approach." "That's good. It means they're not planning an immediate attack." "What will you tell them?" Aiyana was quiet for a long moment. "I will tell them the truth. That you found me dying and nursed me back to health. That you have shown me only kindness and respect. That I stayed here by choice because I had nowhere else to go." "And if they don't believe you?" "Then we will face whatever comes," she said, taking his hand. Together. The Apache warriors came at dawn, materializing out of the morning mist like ghosts. Tom counted 6 of them, all mounted on fine horses and carrying weapons. They formed a semicircle around the ranch house, cutting off any escape routes while remaining far enough back to avoid immediate conflict. Tom and Aiyana had been expecting this moment, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. They stood together on the porch, Tom's rifle within easy reach, but not in his hands. Aiyana straight and proud despite the fear he could see in her eyes. The leader of the group, a man of about 30 with intricate scarification on his face and chest, urged his horse forward. When he spoke, it was in Apache, his voice carrying across the distance with unmistakable authority. "He is my brother-in-law," Aiyana translated quietly. "His name is Nailnish. He was married to my sister before she died of the fever. He's asking if I am being held here against my will." Aiyana replied in Apache, her voice steady and clear. The conversation continued for several minutes, with Tom understanding nothing but able to read the emotions playing across the warriors' faces: anger, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "What are you telling them?" Tom asked during a pause in the conversation. "The truth," Aiyana replied. "That you found me near death and brought me here to heal. That you have treated me with honor and respect. That I am here by choice because I have nowhere else to go." Nailnish spoke again, his tone more challenging. Tom saw several of the other warriors shift restlessly, their hands moving closer to their weapons. "He doesn't believe you," Tom said. "It wasn't a question. He believes that you saved my life," Aiyana said. "But he thinks you must have taken advantage of me while I was weak. He says no white man helps an Apache woman without expecting something in return." Tom felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "What can I do to prove my intentions are honorable?" Aiyana spoke to Nailnish again, and this time the warrior's response was directed at Tom. Though he couldn't understand the words, Tom could hear the challenge in the man's voice. "He says you must prove your respect for me and for our people," Aiyana translated. "He wants to know if you would be willing to face him in single combat." Combat. Tom's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle, but Aiyana caught his wrist. "Not with guns," she said quickly. "Hand to hand. It's a test of honor, not a fight to the death. If you prove yourself worthy, they will accept that your intentions are good." Tom looked at the Apache warrior, who sat his horse with the easy confidence of a man who had fought many battles. Nailnish was younger than Tom, and from the way he held himself, clearly skilled in combat. But Tom had survived the war and 8 years of hard living on the frontier. He wasn't afraid of a fair fight. "Tell him I accept," Tom said. Aiyana's eyes widened with alarm. "Tom, you don't understand. He's not just testing your strength. He's testing your character. If you fight with anger or hatred, you will fail even if you win." "Then I'll have to make sure I fight with the right spirit," Tom replied. The warriors dismounted and formed a circle in the open area in front of the ranch house. Tom removed his shirt and gun belt, handing them to Aiyana. She gripped his hand tightly for a moment. "Remember," she said softly, "this is about proving your honor, not defeating an enemy." Tom nodded and walked into the circle. Nailnish was already there, having stripped to the waist as well. The Apache warrior was lean and muscular, with scars that told of many battles. He spoke briefly to Aiyana, who translated. "He says this is not about hatred between our peoples. It's about determining whether you are worthy of the trust you ask for." Tom nodded to show he understood, then turned to face his opponent. Nailnish moved with fluid grace, circling Tom like a predator. The first attack came suddenly, a lightning-fast strike that Tom barely managed to deflect. The Apache warrior was skilled, using his speed and agility to land quick blows before dancing away from Tom's attempts to grapple. For the first few minutes, Tom found himself on the defensive, struggling to match his opponent's speed. But gradually, he began to adapt, using his slightly greater size and strength to his advantage. More importantly, he began to understand what Aiyana had meant about fighting with the right spirit. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing respect for his opponent and for the traditions he represented. When Nailnish landed a particularly good blow, Tom nodded acknowledgement. When he managed to get the Apache warrior in a hold, he released him before he could cause real harm. The fight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both men were bloodied and breathing hard, but neither had gained a decisive advantage. Finally, Nailnish stepped back and raised his hand, signaling an end to the combat. He spoke to Aiyana, who translated with obvious relief. "He says you fight with honor, that you had opportunities to seriously injure him, but chose not to. He believes now that you are a man of good character." Tom wiped blood from his split lip and nodded respectfully to Nailnish. The Apache warrior returned the gesture, then spoke again. "He wants to know what your intentions are toward me," Aiyana said. "He says if you care for me as you claim, you must be willing to make sacrifices to prove it." Tom looked at Aiyana, then at the circle of warriors watching him. "Tell him that I love Aiyana and want to protect her, that I know our peoples have been enemies, but I believe love can bridge that gap. Ask him what he wants me to do to prove my sincerity." Aiyana translated, and a long conversation followed between her and Nailnish. Tom watched their faces, trying to read the emotions there. Finally, Aiyana turned back to him. "He says there's only one way this can work," she said. "You must come with us to meet with the tribal council. You must be willing to speak for yourself and for your feelings for me. If they accept you, you will be welcome among our people. If they reject you, I'll be killed," Tom finished. "Yes," Tom didn't hesitate. "Tell him I'll come." Aiyana's eyes filled with tears. "Tom, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. These are not my people. They are refugees like me, survivors of other attacks. They have every reason to hate white men, and no reason to trust you." "But they have reason to trust you," Tom said. "And if you tell them that I'm a good man, that might be enough." Nilnish spoke again, and Aiyana translated. "He says we leave at dawn tomorrow. You should bring only what you need for the journey. Everything else," she gestured at the ranch, "you may never see again." Tom looked around at the home he had built, the life he had created in this isolated valley. Then he looked at Aiyana, and the choice was easy. "I'll be ready," he said. That night, Tom and Aiyana held each other close, both knowing that their future was uncertain. They had found love in the most unlikely circumstances, and now they were about to test whether that love could survive the judgment of a people who had every reason to reject them. "Are you afraid?" Aiyana asked as they lay in the darkness. "Terrified," Tom admitted, "but not of dying. I'm afraid of losing you." "You won't lose me," Aiyana said firmly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." As dawn approached, Tom packed a small bag with essential supplies, while Aiyana gathered her few belongings. They stood together on the porch, looking out over the ranch that had been their sanctuary. "No matter what happens," Tom said, "these weeks with you have been the best of my life." "Mine too," Aiyana replied. "And this is not an ending, Tom. It's a beginning." The Apache warriors were waiting as promised, their horses saddled and ready for the journey. Tom mounted his own horse, Thunder, and took his place beside Aiyana. As they rode away from the ranch, he didn't look back. His future was riding beside him, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The sun rose higher as they traveled deeper into Apache territory, toward an uncertain fate, but with the certainty that love, when it is true and strong, can overcome even the deepest divisions between peoples. Tom McKenna, the lonely cowboy who had chosen isolation over pain, had found something worth fighting for, and Aiyana, the Apache woman who had been left for dead, had discovered that healing comes not just from medicine and time, but from the courage to trust and love again. Their story was just beginning, and whatever the tribal council decided, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together, with honor, and with the unshakable belief that love could indeed bridge the gap between two worlds. 6 months later, Tom and Aiyana stood together watching the sunrise over their new home, a valley deeper in Apache territory where the surviving members of several scattered bands had come together to build a new life. The tribal council had been initially skeptical of the white rancher who claimed to love one of their women, but Tom's willingness to leave his old life behind and his respectful integration into their community had eventually won them over. Tom had proven his worth not just as a fighter, but as a man willing to learn new ways of living. He had adapted to Apache customs, learned their language, and used his ranching knowledge to help improve their livestock management. Aiyana had found her place as a healer again, using both her traditional knowledge and the medical skills she had learned from Tom. They had been married in a ceremony that blended both Apache and white traditions, witnessed by a community that had come to accept their unlikely love story. As they stood together in the morning light, Tom's arm around Aiyana's waist, they represented something new, the possibility that understanding and love could overcome even the deepest historical divisions. "Do you ever regret leaving your ranch?" Aiyana asked softly. Tom considered the question, thinking of the life he had built and abandoned. "No," he said finally. "A house is just a building. A home is where the people you love are." Aiyana smiled and leaned against him. "Then we are truly home." In the distance, children played, while their parents prepared for another day of building their new community. It wasn't easy. There were still those on both sides who viewed their union with suspicion. But Tom and Aiyana had proven that love, when it is strong enough and true enough, can heal even the deepest wounds and build bridges across the widest divides. Their story had become legend among the Apache people, the tale of the warrior woman who was left for dead but found new life, and the lonely cowboy who discovered that healing others had healed his own heart. It was a story of courage, compassion, and the transformative power of love in even the harshest circumstances. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Not the color of their skin or the history of their peoples, but the simple truth that two souls had found each other in the wilderness and chosen to build something beautiful together. If you like this story, leave your opinion in the comments and, of course, leave a like and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Big hug and see you soon.